Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlicker, shills, debt slaves, service peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And let's go to the USA and talk about this huge potential merger with AT&T buying out Time Warner. And this comes in the heels of course, of the buyout by Bayer of Monsanto. And that's quite a boon for Monsanto because this name, it's all associations, will now be buried, and the controversy over Monsanto will be transferred over to Bayer somehow, but will be buried a little bit, just losing the name. But in this case, we have these two huge, gigantic mergers that involve tens of billions of dollars, and as another consolidation in this trend that we've seen in the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years of consolidations of these giant corporations. And in my early days, there was of course, the Ma Bell. And they broke up the telephone company because it was established that there was a monopoly across the United States, and they broke up in what they called all these mini Bell companies. And over the years, that great empire has practically reconstituted itself, AT&T, and so these antitrust laws came to naught in that situation in some respects. And that's one of the issues they bring up with the AT&T and Time Warner, that may not pass the smell test for antitrust laws. But let's look back at the fact that when the AOL and Time Warner merged, there was also the same sort of talk, but the merger happened anyway, and that was a huge merger at the time. And and of course, by the time it all ended, Time Warner got burned by their AOL acquisition because it hasn't been very fruitful. But of course, the AT&T and Time Warner one is $80 billion, so that's an amazing amount of money in this potential merger. And I remind you too that I have an article attached below. There's over 100 lobbyists who have a lot of experience, I assure you, who are going to be working on this merger and trying to make it happen. And so this is all about mergers and acquisitions. Two of the big stories, certainly of the last 10 years and previous as well, are buybacks, where these shares are inflated by corporations buying back their own stock and driving up the share price. But another way they've been doing is mergers and acquisitions, just buying out competition and buying other companies rather than putting money into research and development themselves anymore. And they can also immediately cut costs by doing huge layoffs. So we see that. So we'll see a lot of, if the AT&T and Time Warner merger happens, we'll see huge layoffs, of course. And another thing is this is all consolidation. You know, as a friend and I, Mr. Dowdy, talk about all the time, you know, pretty soon it's just, you know, it's 4 corporations, then it's 3, then it's 2, and pretty soon it's 1. But 2 is actually ideal because then they have still the illusion of competition, and in the end, they can have 2 corporations that function in each sector, and they can provide this illusion of competition. But right now, the whole idea is the elimination of competition and market share, because it's baked in the cake, unfortunately, in the kind of capitalism and crony capitalism that we have now, where this constant growth and this constant elimination of anyone who challenges market share. And but the other part of this that's interesting, this Bayer Monsanto and this AT&T and Time Warner mergers, these are the big companies that are behind and writing all the details for all these international trade agreements that we talk about, the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the like. And so this has everything to do with what people talk about as far as the New World Order. Of course, as everyone knows, my regulars know, I prefer the term corporate world governance. And so, like I say, these huge corporations and these mergers where they become even more powerful, and then also they have a vertical and horizontal structure, so they control, you know, huge swaths of related industry as well, controlling both systems and content. And that's another reason why these so-called international trade agreements and everything have everything to do with projecting corporate sovereignty around the world, especially through patents and intellectual property. But of course, there's a lot of financial volatility in this era, and that's also when we find a lot of these sort of gigantic mergers and fusions of these giant corporations, and less competition. And as we know, it'll be the same old story. Right now, they're talking about all the great things that are going to happen for the consumer, and there'll be more efficiency and more competition and all this other garbage. Essentially, we know it'll happen in the end. There'll be hierarchies and censorship and different ways to control flow, and there'll be less choices, and everything will cost a lot more. Anyone who remembers the early days of cable, of course, the promise is that there wouldn't be any commercials. You would get all this programming, and the programming would be much better than television, because it would be funded by people who watch it just paying a low subscription. So you paid a low subscription rate in order to not have advertising and so-called quality programming. So now over the years, of course, we've got 1,000 channels of crap with a sprinkle of quality programming in there, and you see more advertising than you ever saw on regular television, and of course the amount of money that you pay for subscriptions is incredible, hooking up to cable and everything else. So once again, something that used to be free to all citizens, television, has now become something that you pay. You have to factor in hundreds of dollars into the monthly budget in order to pay for. Same thing with telephones. Telephones used to pay $10 a month to have this communication device at home, and now it's become this essential device that you have to budget hundreds every month, 100 or hundreds every month in order to factor into your daily life. So there you have it. Another gigantic merger that may or may not happen, but certainly this is the trend of our time, and we have these handful of mega corporations that sell us all our food, give us all our news, give us all our banking, and in this case, give us our communications. I'm a useful idiot, don't you be one too?